Warning: this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. Blood from the victims evaporated and likely left a mist. What is the creepiest historical fact you know? When some scientist was studying death, he asked a man who was about to be executed via guillotine to blink for as long as he could after his head was chopped off, and he ended up blinking for 30 seconds. The following report was written by Dr. Boru, who experimented with the head of a condemned prisoner by the name of Henri Langlois. On June 28, 1905, the eyelids and lips of the guillotine man worked in irregularly rhythmic contractions for about 5 or 6 seconds. This phenomenon has been remarked by all those finding themselves in the same conditions as myself for observing what happens after the severing of the neck. I waited for several seconds. The spasmodic movements ceased. It was then that I called in a strong, sharp voice, "Langlois." I saw the eyelids slowly lift up, without any spasmodic contractions. I insisted advisedly on this peculiarity, but with an even movement, quite distinct and normal, such as happens in everyday life, with people awakened or torn from their thoughts. Next, Langlois' eyes very definitely fixed themselves on mine and the pupils focused themselves. I was not, then, dealing with the sort of vague dull look without any expression, that can be observed any day in dying people to whom one speaks. I was dealing with undeniably living eyes which were looking at me. After several seconds, the eyelids closed again. It was at that point that I called out again and, once more, without any spasm, slowly, the eyelids lifted and undeniably living eyes fixed themselves on mine with perhaps even more penetration than the first time. Then there was a further closing of the eyelids, but now less complete. I attempted the effect of a third call. There was no further movement, and the eyes took on the glazed look which they have in the dead. There was a local girl named Octavia Hatcher that lost her 10-year-old son, became depressed, and fell ill with a sickness that resulted in a coma and her being pronounced dead. Embalming wasn't common practice yet, so she was buried quickly to prevent the stench. Well, in the next few days more local people fell ill with the same sort of illness, brought on by some type of bug bite, only to recover. Octavia had been buried alive. Her coffin was exhumed, but it was too late. She had woken up and attempted to claw her way out of the coffin before dying of oxygen deprivation. There's a life-sized monument above her grave now that climbers on Mount Everest have to pass dead bodies on their way to the top. Some of the bodies are used as kind of guideposts along the mountain. So you aren't just passing dead bodies, you are actively looking for them because they are waypoints to get you up the mountain. The risk of death for anyone who tries to bring the bodies down is super high. I've heard of some cases where the rescuers died trying to save others or bring down bodies. The human body gets significantly heavier when it freezes. It's just easier and safer to leave the people in the spot they died. There is a story about 3 men dying trying to recover the body of a woman that was about 100 meters from a cabin. She was almost there, but she collapsed and froze while sitting. There's also stories about people finding other people dying but keep walking instead of helping them, because they would probably die too trying to help. Ever wonder what happens if you crash into a wall at 185 miles per hour head-on? Gordon Smiley's 1982 Indy 500 qualifying crash is exactly that. Dr. Steve Olvey is the source of this account. While rushing to the car, I noticed small splotches of a peculiar gray substance marking a trail on the asphalt leading up to the driver. When I reached the car, I was shocked to see that Smiley's helmet was gone, along with the top of his skull. He had essentially been scalped by the debris fence. The material on the racetrack was most of his brain. His helmet, due to massive centrifugal force, was literally pulled from his head on impact. I rode to the care center with the body. On the way in, I performed a cursory examination and realized that nearly every bone in his body was shattered. The little Albert experiment, one which aimed to find if fear was ingrained in our brains or taught by parents. A baby was shown various things: puppies, rabbits, rats, masks, burning newspapers, etc. Being a child, he had no reaction to any of them. Following this, he began presenting soft, fluffy things to the child while slamming a gong with a hammer from behind a curtain to scare the child. The child developed a phobia of white, fluffy things. The experiment ended because this child he was kidnapping from the daycare on his campus had moved away with his mother. Chances are little Albert is still alive and psychologically messed up as a result of this experiment. I find the killing fields of Cambodia to be very disturbing. Pol Pot murdered a huge percentage of his country through starvation and of course execution. 2/7 of the total population. Proportionally, he did better at extinguishing his people than Hitler did in his attempt to extinguish the Jewish people. The goal was to revolutionize the society into one that literally only grew rice and had no money or private property. All inequality and foreign influence would be abolished and Cambodians would live in simple, egalitarian harmony, except for Pol Pot and his buddies of course, they get to still have fancy stuff and actual food. So what do you have to do to implement such a plan? Well, all the educated elites, the capitalists, foreigners, really anybody but peasants need to either die or become peasant farmers themselves. After that it's a progressive spiral where one thing leads to another, all governed by an overarching ideology and belief that any means are worthwhile for the end of a better, communist Cambodia. If you keep being a genital, people are gonna get pissed off and overthrow you. Never really happened to Pol Pot. He was defeated only by foreign invasion, the Vietnamese, and died decades later in his own home living rather peacefully. When I lived there they were digging foundations for a hotel near me. Walked by every day. There was a pile of human bones that grew day by day because that's just how many people died and how many killing fields there are.